And are we live? Okay, great. Thank you everybody for coming this evening. Has anybody been to a hardware meetup before? Who is here for the first time? Oh, interesting. Oh, that looked about like 50-50, so that's good. Well, welcome. My name is Madison. I am the Director of Content at Misty West, and I'm also the organizer for Vancouver Hardware Meetup. So I'd like to welcome you to tonight. I forgot that I gotta click this, each of these. I would like to start this evening with land acknowledgement that tonight's event takes place on the unceded territory of the Coast Salish peoples, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam nations. We do have a code of conduct for this evening, specifically for our hardware meetups. We are committed to providing a harassment-free experience for everyone at our events, regardless of gender identity and expression, sexual orientation, disability, physical appearance, body size, race, age, or religion. So any comments towards our speakers or guests of a harassing nature will not be tolerated, and anyone violating these rules will be asked to leave. We've never encountered that problem before, so I'm optimistic for this evening. To give you a little bit of background about Vancouver Hardware Meetups, we are a forum for local hardware developers, product developers, engineers, makers, entrepreneurs, just about everybody that's maybe connected in the hardware community that can come together in Vancouver and just kind of make connections. We try to meet quarterly. It happens that the last event that we did was pretty much a year ago, but we usually aim to meet around quarterly. During the pandemic, we started hosting more online events. So this is our second event in person since 2020. On the screen here, you can see a couple examples of events that we've done in the last few years. 3 of these were online, and the State of Vancouver Tech was the event that we hosted last year. So yeah, this just kind of gives you an idea of like the types of events that we organize. And to give you a bit of background about Misty West, we are a Vancouver-based engineering design company that exists to create an inclusive and prosperous global community enabled by technology. Some of the past projects that we have worked on include wildlife tracking devices for the World Wildlife Fund and indoor air quality monitoring sensors. We try to focus on projects that advance the UN's Sustainable Development Goals, so projects that have the potential for high impact. Misty West is also currently working on a low-power computer vision SOM that we have a demo of that is out on the table, out by the food. You can definitely learn more about that after the talk, and there's a couple people from Misty West here tonight that can also give you a bit more information about it. So I would like to welcome you to tonight's event, Intelligent and Connected Cities, the Future of Embedded Vision. And I'd like to introduce you to our panelists and give a special shout out to the Home Key. So they are gracious to provide their space for tonight, and they are also providing the live stream so we can have attendees from other locations and outside of the Vancouver area participate in this event. So we're very thankful to be working with them. This is a great opportunity for us. And I'm just gonna go over the names for our panelists, and then I will hand over the microphone in a moment to our host, or our MC. I'm the MC, sorry, you're the moderator. Our moderator, Tony, and we can get the full kind of introductions from all of our speakers. But today we have Stephen Moon, Director of Digital Development at the Reliance Foundry, Douglas Gubbe, who is the President and CTO at Novax Industries, Michael Wiebe, Councillor of the City of Vancouver, and Amy Hunter, the Transportation Lead at PBX Engineering. And moderating tonight's event, we have Tony, who is a business developer at Misty West, and I believe also mechatronics engineer. Mechatronics? Yeah. So thank you everybody for joining us this evening. We're starting the panel discussion momentarily. It'll go for about 45 minutes to an hour, and then we'll have about a 15-minute Q&A from the audience. And then we'll leave plenty of time afterwards for networking and mingling. So thank you. And that is it. I'm gonna hand it over to Tony.
Great, thank you, Madison. Alrighty. So yeah, hey folks, my name is Tony. I'm a business developer at Misty West, but you're not here to see me. You're here to see all of our fantastic panelists. So can I get you all to give a quick intro on who you are and what you're doing? And
yeah, my name is Wiebe. I'm a city councillor here in Vancouver. I've been elected 8 years. I spoke at the Smart Cities Conference in Mississauga about 4 years ago when the City of Vancouver was doing our work to the Smart Cities Challenge. I don't know if anyone knows about it, but we didn't win it, but it has kind of pushed our innovation using transportation as a big component of it, autonomous vehicles and LOT.
Yeah, hi, I'm Amy Hunter. Does this sound like it's on? No, I didn't think so. Hi there. Yeah, we're good. Okay, my name is Amy Hunter, and I'm, like they said, I'm the transportation lead at PBX Engineering. PBX Engineering is a full-scale electrical engineering firm. We've been in the business for about 25 years. We specialize in intelligent transportation systems, so anything from lane reversals, wildlife detection systems. I've actually personally deployed several smart cities technologies, adaptive street lighting, adaptive traffic signals, advanced signal detection. It goes on, and I'm sure we're going to get into all of the projects that I've done and the pitfalls and the challenges of them all tonight.
Hi everyone, I'm Stephen Moon, Director of Digital Development at Reliance Foundry. What we're doing is we're actually spinning out a new kind of an internal startup called CitySage, and what we're doing is focusing on bringing really environmental understanding for cities to understand their environment. Used understanding a number of times there, so I hope you get that.
Understand?
Yeah, exactly. It's complicated, but yeah, no, it's. We're just really trying to drive this really high value, high security, high privacy platform in the industry. So that's why I'm here.
Hi, I'm Douglas Gubbe, President CTO of Novax Industries. We're about a 40-year-old company. I've been involved in the industry of transportation, traffic signal control, for most of that, doing a lot of research and pioneering in the field, standard setting. And particularly this last 10 years, I guess it's kind of working, moving our technology more towards smart city environments to be able to include more sensor array and more information, and be able to work towards, like say, real-time use of that data as much as possible, and cloud-based services, for example. So it's been an interesting ride, and we've got, let's say, a long ways to go yet. But I really appreciate all you coming to listen to what we have to say.
Fantastic. Can we get a hand for our panelists here? Okay, so I have a stack of questions here, and I figure we'll sort of get the discussion going and then see where we end up. Amy, you mentioned having worked on a whole bunch of different technologies and projects and things. I'll start with you on this one. What technology are you most excited about in the smart city space for how it's going to change things?
Totally, and we're getting there. And it's combining smart cities, like data collection, with AI, processing of the data. Like, so often now we're collecting data and it's going somewhere, and then people are doing stuff with the data, and then they're coming up with solutions. But something where like AI can process it like in the instant, live, and actually produce an outcome. So combining AI with Internet of Things is what I'm most excited about.
Funny you should mention that. Shameless plug for the song. Yeah, I guess, Stephen, what are you most excited about in this front?
It's a tough one. So a lot of what I'm excited about brings a lot of danger to our potential surveillance state that we're going to talk about later. But I think for me, it's from a hardware perspective, since I think we're all hardware people here, is the ability to turn something from nothing to connected, encrypted in the cloud in less than a day. I think that is extremely transformational, that you couldn't do that in the 90s. You certainly can do it today, but it also brings an element of extreme danger, is that it's really, really easy, and we don't know necessarily what's going to happen to the data and how it's going to be combined with other stuff and all these other things. So I'm excited about it because there's also a ton of opportunity to help protect the users of those systems. That's about it.
Yeah. What about you, Michael? What are you most excited about?
Most people talk about transportation from city building, but for me it's on heat and energy. We're recognizing how we can take energy from one building and shift it to others in one grid and move it down and make sure when floors aren't being utilized, because so much of our GHGs come from burning natural gas for heating our buildings. And so if we can reduce the amount of energy, lights and all of it, our power grid right now is tight, right? So we don't have a lot of space to build more power grids here in Vancouver. And so understanding that we're building one underneath in the elementary school and what that looks like. So for me, on a city building standpoint, it's really about how to better use our energy, more circular systems. But for me, the Internet of Things is really key to that, because we waste so much in every building, mostly in the downtown core. We're seeing huge opportunities for it. Vancouver's building our own district energy system that uses sewage heat, and it's just understanding how to best use that, because it doesn't have the longevity of some other energy sources. So when there are those peaks in demand, so it's better utilizing the heat and energy in our city, as well as the cold water. So the convention center has pipes that go out and uses the differential between the energy and the water and the heat in the building. And so we need to use that more. But to do that, we have to know where the energy needs to be and how we can shift it.
And Douglas, what are you most excited about?
Bit of two things. There's talk about edge computing, and and connection to the internet and cloud computing and whatnot. But the edge computing is probably the most exciting part for me. Is that I've seen over the years they've been talking about big data, and like as Amy has mentioned, there's a lot of sometimes where the data kind of comes in and it just kind of goes into some place. Sometimes it gets used, sometimes it doesn't. And how to take advantage of that data when it's most valuable in real time is a key thing. And the second part of that is actually crowdsourcing. Is that it's an edge that we have to talk about openly. But there's a lot of people are carrying around data sensors with them everywhere. And if that's used carefully and used in an open manner, there's a lot more information that can be gained from a lot of services that. Taking advantage of that. So
yeah, I'm curious to dig in on the edge computing and in the AI. So maybe what do you think is possible now that was just totally infeasible, say 10 years ago, in this edge AI from a technical standpoint? And let's start with that, and then I'll ask the privacy question. So I don't know. Amy, you want to go on this one?
Yes, I do. Okay, so what's really possible now is that we all have cell phones. We've been collecting Bluetooth data using Bluetooth sensors along roadways and releasing travel time data. We see it along Highway 1 out to Chilliwack and stuff. We're using it today, right now, live data, and we're giving you how long it's going to take you to get to the next exit. But what we could be doing with that data is we could be altering the green time on our traffic signals to optimize the traffic signals better for the actual travel demand in real time. We could be doing that, but we're not currently.
Coming soon?
Novax?
Yeah, and what about on the privacy side? I'll open this up. What becomes possible? One of the things that we're excited about is the ability, like if you process at the edge, you can get the inferences you want out and then discard the rest of the data, and so you can use a potentially privacy invasive signal like a camera and only pick off the info that you need. So maybe how does this edge processing change the privacy equation? Let's open this up to anybody who wants to jump on it.
So yeah, there are means and ways to scrub the information, especially if you can use it quickly, and then you may store bits and pieces of it, but it doesn't have to be attached to somebody's name. Like for example, be able to sense like how many people are in a room or in an area. For transportation, let's say we're at BC Place and they got the Canucks are playing, and I'm gonna have like thousands of people kind of coming in and then kind of like sitting down, and there's nothing happening in the area, and then you got thousands of people leaving, right? How do you deal with that in terms of transportation, traffic control, policing? I mean, if right now the systems are not really set up to handle that, and that's why you see a lot of police around the area, but that could be probably done an automated way if the systems actually understood what was actually happening in those areas, collecting that information and be able to, like say, use that in real time, but it doesn't necessarily have to affect anybody's privacy, right?
Yeah, so I've been doing a lot of research into this recently. It's because we're trying to build a business that's selling a data product into cities. It is the responsibility of cities, and this was a really difficult thing as a hardware, an engineering type person to make this leap, because at first I was like, this is stupid. This doesn't make any sense. This is impossible. I can't tell you where we're putting all of our data. I can't copy it into 3 different places. All this kind of stuff. The reason I bring that up is because I read a lot on this Boston Consulting Group, and it's hard to understand today what this data is going to turn into in the future. With AI on the edge, so today it's limited, but next year, the year after that, we're suddenly being able to do extreme workloads on the edge. That's just the natural progression of things. So we're talking about, like, let's say we're discarding that data. Today, maybe we're discarding that data, but eventually we'll be able to use that data on the device to extract much, much more information, potentially turning into that surveillance state on the device itself, not relying on the cloud, right? Because we're just gonna get more and more advanced. So how do we protect against that, right? What we do today is not necessarily what we're gonna see in the future. And the example I use for this is Henrietta Lack. I don't know if any of you heard of her. So she's, back in the 50s, she had cancer, and what they discovered was her cells had this like immortal property. So they use it. It's called the HeLa cell. HeLa, yeah, it's the first 2 letters of her names. And then the cell genealogy has produced billions of dollars in commercial success, and it has produced amazing cancer research and AIDS research and all these things that save millions and millions of lives. But the person whose cells it came from, when they did it, it was just like, hey, this is interesting. But what did her cells turn into? It turned into something unbelievably different. In fact, it's unrecognizable. And did they receive compensation? Did they give consent? All these kinds of things. We can talk philosophically about that later. But here, we just often don't know what that data, even the decimated or the reduced data set, is going to be used when it's combined with other sources, and what that different story tells. It's not a big leap to start to guess that, hey, my Bluetooth ID is going to be tracked, and eventually it's going to be combined with some other piece of data, and now everyone knows where I am, kind of thing, right? So today, it's exciting that we can do all this fun stuff on the edge, but my comment on the edge is, where is the edge? And the edge is not a static location.
Yeah, from a city standpoint, this has always been an issue of where our data is stored as the city. And I know everyone's seen the Mobi bikes. Those were early adopters of having stations where we could basically know where people are moving around the city. And that was a very difficult conversation of what it looked like to have the city have a citywide Wi-Fi that would basically be able to track people, and where was that information, how was it being done. And so I think from a city standpoint, this is always a concern to residents when they want to know that their information is being held, and how trustful is the city IT when they're watching a city council meeting and we can't even do a proper Zoom call or WebEx, and they're going, now you've got all my information and data, but I'm watching you and you guys can't host a basic meeting. We're 2+ years in this thing and you have a $100 million IT department, right? And so it is scary when we start to look at what our cameras and what our authorities can do, right? I mean, there's cameras now everywhere. And so what is the authority our police have? How many of those cameras can be utilized? A whole bunch from the Olympics are there, and they're not turned on. Yeah. But they're there. And if they do get turned on, like you said, what's going to happen in the future? So I think this is a huge concern from a city standpoint, because people do believe that we need to be trusting people and making sure they are not being tracked, and that they have that kind of they can walk around our city freely, and I think that's something everyone wants to have. And so this is going to be a tough conversation as we build smarter cities.
How have you folks seen, like from an architecture standpoint, trying to split the valuable data off of the privacy risk data? How do you approach that in trying to tackle these problems and working at the cutting edge?
I was just going to offer, there was making me think about the city of Toronto and the sidewalk labs, I think it was called. And they, Alphabet put a proposal in the city of Toronto to use the waterfront. It's about 12 acres or something like that, I can't remember, 20 acres. And what they said is, we're going to make this beautiful like this. The roads are going to be heated. You're going to have, you're going to have like cafes everywhere. It's going to be so much better kind of thing than you had before, right? And it was a big investment. And the only thing is that, everything that you do is being tracked while you're there. And all of a sudden, when the proposal started coming through the city councilors, everything looked good until I think there was a realization that the people were the product, and treated as your personal data was treated as a currency that you were kind of benefiting from indirectly, but not directly, and somebody else is making huge profits off of that information. And the whole thing kind of fell apart last year. And so it was really an eye-opener for people, I think, we understand that sometimes you need commercial entities to make these things happen, right? And everybody loves using Google Chrome. Nobody pays for a search, right? But you don't mind the ads coming to you, right? So there's a certain level, I think, that, and having some open conversation, I guess, between what people are willing to part with, people are able to opt out without necessarily being cut off from the services. So there's a lot of discussion, I think, that has to happen in that area before we're not there yet.
But I feel like your privacy is still protected. I mean, you're taking people's Mac IDs off their phones, and it's a Mac ID. Well, maybe it's not. Is it linked to a person? So the corporation is like, yes, 200,000 Mac IDs are coming to this park, so therefore I'm going to give you money to build the park. But I don't know that John Smith is going to be there. Or, John Smith is meeting up with not Mrs. Smith. Like, I don't know that that's happening, And so currently, any sort of data capturing that we've installed, and we do license plate capture for the Port Authority, it immediately, once it's captured, gets scrambled into another hashtag code, which then goes to a cloud and then is deleted after 24 hours. So it's never really linked to anybody. So I don't know if there's, like, everybody's worried about privacy, and same with the Mobi. Surely they don't know that. I mean, you swipe your credit card, but are you really storing that, Amy Hunter got on a Mobi and went from point A to point B? Or is it just that an individual went on a Mobi and, it's immediately not? Privacy is already being, like, scrubbed from the data, like, right when it's captured.
The nervousness of it was that every time you walked by any of the city Wi-Fi, it knew that you hit that point. So that's where people got nervous. Even if you went on a bike or didn't go on a bike, just when I walked past one, or if I'm driving past, you hit all those points in the city. And so then you could start to track people as they went through those points.
But could you, or was the software scrubbing it?
That's a question.
Yeah, that.
The owner of the software.
Yeah.
It's actually taking the data, right? So and I appreciate some, like, especially if it's a government entity, that's absolutely critical, privacy and security, right? But when you're talking about commercial operations, right, or commercial businesses you're loading a phone on an app onto your phone, and then all of a sudden it gives you this agreement of terms, which goes on like about 30 pages. Whoever reads those, you may be giving away all your rights, all your information, and just by clicking that agree button without even realizing it.
The Apple terms of service used to have you certify that you would not use iTunes to manufacture chemical, biological, or nuclear weapons.
Oops.
Yeah,
you read it.
I didn't read the fine print. Whoops.
Yeah, that like scrambling in the architecture, is really key to be able to get the benefit out, right? So that it's not just like add on to a database of every license plate we've seen for the last 10 years. Like that kind of design is, I think is key. And navigating that as designers, thinking about what kind of impact our products will have is super important, and something that we think a lot about at Misty West. I want to throw another question out here of sort of what in the smart cities world has been hyped up a whole bunch and coming soon might happen and kind of hasn't materialized that you wish would?
I mean, from a standpoint, we've been planning for autonomous vehicle routes in the city, so it's been pretty interesting that was part of our Smart Cities Challenge, is creating routes in the city that we would have to do. We almost had a deal with Google at one point that they were going to do deliveries and we were going to be a pilot city, and so we right? We're seen as Vancouver. People want to pilot in Vancouver, and something that our staff are really moving forward with IC Impact. I don't know if anyone knows, they've done amazing work in creating roads that rehabilitate themselves and able to spray bottoms of building, and now they're seismically safe. Like, they're coming up with technologies through collaboration with India and Vancouver, and so utilizing these technologies, we're as a city are now saying, bring us new technologies and let's pilot them, right? And a lot of organizations are taking us on it, saying, yeah, we'd love to have a pilot in Vancouver. And so I think that's something we're doing that's good, but we are planning some stuff that we thought would be coming, and it's taking years and years to kind of formulate, and as well as kind of electric charging, because we're now, our light posts we're seeing around the world where they're recognizing when they go to LEDs, there's more energy in there, and could you make each one power and what that looks like. So I think we're gonna see a lot in the transportation world coming up first, but people thought a lot of this would already be here. A lot of the traffic stuff, people had already assumed that when you drive, our lights are properly signaled and know that it's a busy time and slow down. And we do have a center that's starting to work some of that technology in.
Largely not in Vancouver, though.
Huh?
Not in Vancouver, though. But it's a challenge with the PEDs. But anyway.
Yeah. So I think for us, I think we're getting ready for it. And we're planning the city of the future. And in that, we're hoping to see autonomous vehicles and transportation, because we have a congestion issue that is, we're not building any more roads. We're actually looking to reduce 11% of our roads away for public plazas and green space and the stuff we love. And so if we're gonna keep adding this many people with less roads, we're gonna need to better utilize our roads, and that's where the smart technologies need to come and play.
I was going to say autonomous vehicles and just like mic drop, because we've been talking about autonomous vehicles, I swear, since the 2000s and 2010. Like, it's been over a decade. We've been talking about autonomous vehicles. I could just, yeah, you'd think they would have been here by now.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that autonomous vehicles, and it kind of reminds me, they were first doing that one in, I think it was Los Angeles, and somebody hacked into the car because it was open Wi-Fi on it, and stopped it in the middle of the freeway. And all of a sudden realized, oh, hey, we can't have that. Well, of course, well, then the vehicle's not connected to anything, then, you know, what benefit is it? So, I mean, you know, if I go back, like, say, back in the 1990s, actually is when the, you know, it was in the US DOT reserved a frequency just for what they call connected vehicles, 5.9 gigahertz. It's when it's supposed to be all vehicles, trucks, everything as commercial would have these radios on it, and would communicate with intersections. So, for example, if you're going too fast and the light was going to change to yellow, it would kind of warn the driver, say, hey, you need to slow down, right, ahead of time, you know, things like that. And also, you know, vehicle-to-vehicle collisions. But it's, you know, we're 30 years later, literally, and they just started kind of rolling it out with vehicles in the last year and a bit, kind of thing. And the point is, you know, it's that, you know, 5G communications has come up, kind of thing, and now it's a serious contender, so they're looking to check it out and start all over again. So, like I say, that was something that started 30 years ago. It was a great vision, but never really actually happened. But I think with 5G technologies, I think, and a lot of European companies now embracing using cellular instead of built radios, so that they have something that's already on the vehicles, already in the person, kind of thing. I think our roads should be able to, like I say, make them more efficient. And also systems like, say, transit. I think we've been through City of Vancouver the last 15 years, 3 different transit priority projects, and we still don't have priority ubiquitously through the whole region, where, you know, where transit is given the privilege at every intersection so that they can move more efficiently. And I think it's cool when you see, you know, people are sitting in their cars and they see a bus going by and passing by them. That's a great thing. You know, if we're not getting people out of their vehicles, you know, and onto transit, we're in some serious trouble. So.
I would say in the smart city context, pretty much everything has failed, has promised more than any value they might get out of it. And I think that could come down to us thinking that what we've created is so unbelievable. But we trivialize things. We do this as engineers, and we say, oh, this is going to take 2 weeks. Of course we're all wrong, right? So, but we have that same problem here, is that, you know, let's say a city has a whole brand new LED light system, and they have cameras and sensors all over the place. Guess what? Someone loses a password to the system, someone forgot about all this data they're collecting, and it's gone. It's just not being used, because it wasn't really solving a problem. Like, the city wasn't having a problem solved, they just had sensors. that kind of speaks back to a little bit my previous comment on it's dangerous to have hardware development so fast because it just puts stuff out there, and then we have all this stuff that doesn't do anything useful. At another note here was is like on this vehicle thing, like how do we, like smart driving, I have a Tesla, I've had it for a few years. It's unbelievably complex to do a self-driving system. Like, I put autopilot on and I'm like, am I gonna die? Like, is it, like, why is it driving the center? It's like, can it go on to the right? These things that we have as intuitive human beings, we trivialize technology because we think it's so powerful. But it's actually not, and it's amazing how complex it is for us to drive down a road and get to the other end alive, and we haven't killed anyone on the way there, right? It's actually, but if we threw machines out there, that's kind of what would happen for a while in today's state, right? So, yeah. And yeah, 30, 40, 50 years later, we're still dealing with the same.
Yeah, on the point of reducing the number of roads and figuring out how to get traffic to flow through the YouTube channel, Not Just Bikes, is fantastic for their ideas on how to change city design. It's a guy from London, Ontario who moved to Amsterdam and was like, this is so good, people need to know about it. So yeah, shout out to Not Just Bikes, I guess. One question I've got on that is, so we've talked about being able to make the streets safer and make things easier for sort of pedestrians and cyclists and whatnot. What do you see as opportunities for smart city technologies to bring broad benefits to the community and not just maybe like one core user group, or particularly around in like equity contexts or where it's helping disadvantaged communities access things that they might not have previously?
I'll take a first stab. So I think, like I say, this is kind of where my dream anyway, is that between the edge computing, like say taking advantage of processing with AI on the site, using the information that's valuable, still having your cloud managed resources. So now the idea is like, it's like they say the whole is greater than the sum of the parts in this particular case, where you've now got not just say vehicles moving more efficiently, but you've got transit, you've got emergency services, that emergency truck that needs to get from point A to point B as quick as possible, having that information about where there's an accident, where there's an issue, where there's a problem that's going to impede his travel plan, right? Sharing information between services where it really you get the value out of the system that you can't get from in disparate systems on their own.
I think this is a tough question because there's a generational thing too, where I've seen smart buildings where we've gone in and there are people that aren't used to smart technology and they don't feel welcome in those spaces. They don't understand it. They feel, right? They feel like alienated by going into these spaces when they're traditionally used to picking up the phone or knocking on the door. And so I think that as we introduce these, we need to make sure that we are bringing on our vulnerable people, because I think sometimes a group of people might be like, this is a great idea, it's going to help the downtown east side, we've got this. But if the downtown east side and peers aren't involved in the design, the implementation isn't going to help them. And I think a lot of times we don't include the users in design, and I think as a city we're starting to recognize that if we don't have the small business owner involved, and I'm saying, like I did the restaurants, and we did COVID recovery for restaurants, the first iteration of what was going to happen wasn't going to work until I was able to get restaurant owners that knew what they were doing to work with our city staff to get what we have today, and they're beautiful. But if you don't have the users that really understand it, working on it, it's not going to help the most vulnerable people. It's not going to help the marginalized, right? We talked today about doing a First Nation land acknowledgement. I mean, what we're seeing is building on Indigenous values is what Vancouver and the rest of the world is going to be known for. I was just at a conference in Whistler with elected officials from across the province. All of us talk about restoring Indigenous knowledge into what we do. So how is that knowledge going to be included in this work in building smart cities? Because the biomimicry is becoming huge in architectural design, because we're recognizing that you can actually reduce the heat of a building by utilizing biomimicry and smart design. So I think as we do it, let's try to find ways to bring Indigenous knowledge to these systems and use biomimicry and knowledge that's been here for thousands of years into these programs, and then the most vulnerable will feel included because we're actually building on those natural systems.
Yeah, the only example I can think of is, again, where I see autonomous vehicles coming out sooner would be in long-haul trucking operations and commercial vehicles. And what we could hope is that making those systems more efficient would reduce cost of products and hopefully disseminate to the greater, broader, and more vulnerable populations.
Yeah. I guess one quick other one. Some of the AI that's being utilized now, like Sunrise that makes tofu here in China, right? They've used AI for some of their jobs that were really tough, right? Just moving one thing for 8 hours with really hot temperatures, and they're able to better pay the staff that are there. They're able to stay here in Vancouver. And so I think utilizing AI to reduce some of the employment that was really low paid and be able to pay a more living wage to the people and be able to keep them in place in Vancouver is critical. And so I think finding ways to improve the workers in some of these places to ensure that they are getting a living wage to live here in Vancouver safely is important.
More on that. I recently read that the trucker turnover is actually nearing 100% year over year. So sometimes when you talk about taking away that job, people are like, long haul trucker jobs, but it's not actually a really successful career path for anybody. And people, like I said, turnover year over year, 100% turnover. So I just wanted to clarify that fact too.
I actually used to be a long-haul truck driver.
Wow.
I'm not kidding. And yes,
so if an AI did your job, yeah.
Yeah, it's mostly mistreatment of drivers, but yeah, that's a different issue.
Yeah, that figuring out how to get automation to get that trade-off of like how can we take the really brutal, like the jobs that are just really hard on people and like dangerous, and how can we make those safer by automating them, and then there's a larger governance question around, which would be an entire evening and probably several drinks around how to distribute that equitably.
So I would just suggest here that I think it revolves around what problem is being solved.
Yeah.
Like, so when we put out a technology, maybe it's solving the truck driver shortage or whatever, are we actually solving a problem to make lives better or spaces better? You know, like at Reliance Foundry, our motto is making places people want to be, right? So we're a 100-year-old company, and we're trying to put digital and smart technology in our products, but at the end of the day, if we're not solving a problem, we're not going to get engagement from the users that we expect to get engagement from. At the end of the day, it's understanding what it is you're trying to solve. So if let's say we want a park to have better utilization because they don't want overflowing trash bins, well, let's put a smart sensor in the trash bin, right? So to prevent that from happening. Or maybe it's being aware before a park gets flooded beside the river, let's say on the Burnaby's foreshore or something like that, like to know that that's about to happen, and so that people's feet don't get wet, or something more serious. But I really think it's the connection to the people, it's the connection to the actual problem being solved, and applying the technology in such a way that it is actually solving that problem instead of like some other thing that we've imagined that won't be like self-driving, that won't come to fruition for another 20, 30 years. Right?
Yeah, I think that's really important. We've seen it with smart playgrounds. The goal was to get parents and children more involved in playgrounds. Well, when you bring in people sitting on cell phones playing this game, you recognize that they're actually on their phones more, and that's not the goal. The goal is to get them to natural play and be outside. So I like that, of making sure we're solving the problem and doing it in a way that makes sense.
It might be solving a problem because the problem is I want more time on my screen so my kids can play on the playground.
It's interesting you mention that. I mean, I think it's, some of the successes in ITS or smart cities. The smart cities has been through a lot of names. Like, going back, I was involved in what they call ITS Canada, Intelligent Transportation Canada, for years, and they're just celebrating their, I think, 25th anniversary right now. And then back in those days, they call it Intelligent Highway Vehicle Systems, IVHS. And then it became Intelligent Transportation Systems. And it's kind of morphed into smart cities now. But if you take like commercial vehicles as a good example, that a lot of money, a lot of time is spent on, instead of vehicles having to go over a bridge, or they had to pull over and they had to go through it, get weighed, and then they had to get inspected. Now everything is automated. They just drive their route point to point, and they don't need to pull over anymore. They got weigh in motion. They weigh the vehicles while they're going down the freeway, and they got tags on the vehicles, so they know exactly what the contents are, and if they get changed or if the truck deviates off of a route, they know about it, and then it gets inspected. Right, so there's been a lot of success in these areas, but I think there's a lot of areas we don't know. I take a look when I was some projects were involved in the U.S., like City of Chicago, a few years back. They started deploying. I think they're going to put 1,000 sensors out around the city just to discover the pulse or what makes the city tick. And it's like we really don't know, but we want to collect a bunch of information just to kind of see, what it is we don't know and what we might be able to use that data better for. So it's kind of eventually say it's trying to solve a problem, but there's some things that say you don't know what you don't know, right? And maybe there's some things that you can take advantage of just because you've ventured into that area of the unknown kind of thing and got some information. Then you say, oh, this is kind of neat. Now I take a look at the really good examples of Weather Channel, right? And some years ago, before they started, somebody had this idea of doing 24-hour weather, and they thought they were nuts. It's like, who's going to watch a Weather Channel? But they started taking that information and they started looking at it for advertising, like say it was like the equivalent of a Canadian Tire, right? And they were doing their average advertisements for lawnmowers when it was sunny out because they thought that's when people were interested. But they actually took a look at the data between weather and when people were actually buying, and they realized that it's actually when it's raining out, people were actually thinking about cutting their lawn. And so it totally changed how they were marketing to people, right? So there was the unintended consequences of comparing that information. So like I said, there's a lot of things that we don't know. I'm sure we will discover by putting this sensor information out there and opening it up to people to explore with it.
That does lead into one of the questions. One of the things that I've heard, I was at the Vancouver Polyglot Unconference and talking with somebody who works in the city of Nanaimo's IT department. And one of the things that he talked about is that they have a bunch of smart systems and they're siloed and they can't get the data out of them and there's no interop, and then like they keep having this story of some department buys a system, stands it up, nobody maintains it, and it gets abandoned. So what do you all see as kind of the happy path forward on how to get interoperability and how to sort of dissolve these silos to get the value out?
I hadn't created a solution for it, but that was one of my problems I was going to bring to this discussion, but you just took it right out of my mouth. But yeah, because when I was presented with Internet of Things back years ago, I visualized all of these sensors intermingling together at the management center at the city, and it was all sort of nicely laid out on a computer screen on one app. But what it's resulted in is a whole bunch of sensors all over the place with different apps, and you have to have logins and passwords to all of them, and it's just a nightmare. So perhaps just one software that can integrate all of the sensors would be a solution.
What do you think of like open source standards?
Open language, yeah.
Right,
like
language.
Like traffic control, we have NTCIP. It's a standard protocol that everybody, whether you're a message sign above a freeway, a detector device on the side of the road, or traffic control, they all speak the same language, so that people are developing, you can share with that information between devices. But that doesn't exist in a lot of areas, or at least on a level that it needs to be.
It's like we're in the wild, wild west of smart cities, right? And so everything's sort of developed and there's no standards, there's no regulations yet.
What does it look like at the city managing and running all of these different systems that you guys have got?
So we have the smaller ones we talked about, the pilot and the little ones, but we are putting open source data and we are putting the sensors up, and we're trying to get as much information out there as possible. So you can, like the goal is at one point you will be able to see where all the snow trucks are and what streets have been done and what time yours should be done. And like the idea is that you would know everything what's happening around the city, right? When one of our sewer outflows is going to the ocean, you'll know so you don't go swimming. Right, and that's something we want to stop in general, but we have those sensors up now, and they do go onto open source data. So we have created a site and a portal. So we are working to make sure that all that information can be as public as possible, so we can start to have that info that organizations could start to pull and use that data as well as they create technologies that can help the city of Vancouver. So we're trying to recognize that a lot of organizations collect different data, and so it's not just being siloed to the city with engineering, but Metro Vancouver collects some of them, Vancouver Coastal Health collects some of them, and so when you have so many different partners and NGOs that are collecting water samples, that we're all collecting them differently, we're now recognizing that it needs to be standardized. So when you're collecting this, or the type of sensor used needs to be the style, the system, because we need to start talking the same language to be able to have real data that can actually be used by an elected official, because it's clear it's been utilized similarly on certain dates, and I can go, okay, I take this data and make a decision with it. We don't make a lot of decisions right now utilizing a lot of that data. And so I think one of the things is, how do you take that raw data from the Internet of Things to help an elected official make a decision? I think it works more at a staff level, but when you start to get to an elected official level, we don't see that granular data as much as we'd hope.
This is a really interesting question, because back to my Henrietta Lack example, and also just general data stewardship. So let's say we produce a whole pile of data, we open it up to the world, or whoever might want access. So the question is, what are the unintended consequences? What are the unintended opportunities for surveillance that are in that public data? And how do you control that as a city who is responsible for the stewardship of that data? How do you make sure that that is handled responsibly by those who are consuming it? We can go back to, what is that English, where the Facebook thing, where they took all that data.
Cambridge Analytica.
Yeah, Cambridge Analytica. Yeah. Like, no one ever thought all this Facebook data could, of course, the smart people thought that, right? So there's a lot of good actors out there, but there's also a lot of bad actors that are wanting to do this. Here's an example. So let's say we're monitoring a water level in a sewer system or a manhole cover, right? Very valuable. Like, actually, it wasn't that long ago that Oak Street had a manhole cover blow off and shut down the street and all that kind of stuff. It's pretty serious. Like, you want to know about those things in advance, right? But what if there's an industrial complex that wants to dump a bunch of chemicals, and they understand that these are there, they find some way of replacing them or hacking them or something like that. This is maybe a far-fetched concept, but it's pretty low-hanging fruit, so I just grabbed it. But maybe they're like, oh, I'm going to hack this and say there is no change in level here, but I'm going to dump a ton of chemicals into the water system, right? You never would have thought such a benign measurement of water level in a sewer system could produce such really hazardous results, right? But the thing is, we just don't know. Unknown unknowns. I think it's, how do we manage opening up complete data systems and say that that's okay? Like, yeah, it's a big question.
The other one that we're seeing is, it means the city has to be open and honest. And a lot of times, a public will grab one of those and be like, I can't believe that this is happening. It will scare the city and we'll shut it down, right? Like, because we're going to be open and honest that the water quality might not be as good because that sensor is saying it, right? Like, we might say we've cleared 25% of our streets, right? And then you can look at the open data and be like, you cleared 14%. And suddenly it's front page of the Sun. And so it does make it more, right? It does open us up. And I think that's something that we need to be as cities, is more open and transparent. It's not easy. And so I would love cities to use open data more, because I want us to showcase that we don't have enough. And if we're going to need more, it will take more funding. Or if there's new creative solutions, bring them to us. But I like that idea that we are open, but it does make it more vulnerable, because we might be saying one thing and the data says something else.
Don't get me wrong, I'm a huge fan of this, by the way, like, I'm in the industry. But there's just a lot to consider, right? It's about, there are solutions to this, and of course we're working on those solutions, but it's a very, very, at the surface, oh yeah, this is awesome. But you don't have to go too deep until like, oh, this is really interesting. And I went through the whole grieving process here when I went out there. So like anger and all these kinds of things. It's like, I don't like this. They're dumb. But actually, the cities are learning to be responsible and good stewards of our data.
Brought up an example of, I was just thinking the conference I was back a few years ago, just before COVID actually, and like this has actually spawned a whole new industry of cybersecurity that really didn't exist before, and it was to do with train operators. And so you can imagine a train, going 100 kilometers an hour down a track, and there's an awful lot more electronic controls in those things. And you think, the potential for something to go wrong and somebody to interrupt something is completely like disastrous, right? And so a lot of firms have been coming up and finding out how are we going to handle this, And of course that's a massive learning curve for them, because people find creative ways to work around security just as much as people are trying to develop security almost at the same rate probably, right? So it does create a massive challenge. I mean,
about safety of data for a municipality, it is worth mentioning that since the history of time, not a single traffic signal has been hacked across Canada. Not once has it ever happened. We've all seen the heist, and people are programming traffic signals, but
that doesn't
honestly,
mean try it.
yeah. So and
This
actually,
isn't a call to the people in the room. We know have a really smart group here.
Yeah.
Don't try to break one of the City of Vancouver traffic signals.
It's interesting because a lot of them are communicating amongst themselves using radio comm, and it's just like a 988 gigahertz or whatever signal, but nobody's hacked it.
I did see somebody at the start of a talk, speaking of security stuff, if you want like eye-opening both in it's incredible what people can get computers to do, and also, wow, this is kind of terrifying. The attack surface is massive and human ingenuity is astounding in terms of ways they can figure out to break things. I was watching a talk from the Black Hat conference that they post them on YouTube. They're great. Check them out if you have the interest, or if you're interested in them. And one of them, the guy started his talk with, okay, so I'm here and I'm required by, I don't know, it was like the settlement or something to tell you that you're not allowed to do any of this on your own, and this is just for advice. And they really got mad at me when I figured out, when I built, what was it? He built his own transponder to pretend to be an ambulance to flip signals so that he could race through. So yeah, the attack surface is very much like, yeah, it gets bigger the more devices we add, and we get quite a security challenge from it.
You know what's interesting, you talk about security, the biggest vulnerability is not the computers, it's not the software, it's us. Yeah. There was a fellows working with the transportation in Ontario, and one of their, you see those big signs on the side of the freeway, right? Tells you like, hours of there's something going on, whatever it is, delays, whatever. And somebody hacked it and they put zombies ahead. And I thought it was kind of cool. It's kind of funny, but what they realized is that how did somebody get into this thing? It's got passwords, it's got everything. And so like when the guy gets out, the technician gets out there, they open the door up and it's got the password written, big black ink right in the front of it there. So, so we're probably our own worst enemies.
Security at the expense of convenience comes at the expense of security. Right? Yeah. So, yeah, so I think I'd love to open it up to the crowd here for any questions from the audience. Right here in the front.
In the front. So with the city, when you have open source data, how do you prioritize it? How do you get people, how do you budget people to create the APIs for it so that it's actionable? Is there an actual body that's figuring all that stuff out?
Yeah.
I'm just going to repeat the question here just for the folks on stream. So tell me if I get this wrong. So with the open source data, how do you budget for people to build the APIs for it and to build the structure around to be able to handle it? Prioritize.
They sound like political choices almost. So how does that happen?
Yeah, I mean, it is a huge line item now in the City of Vancouver. We've recognized how important it is. So we do prioritize through council priorities. So we prioritize what we think is important, and then they will go out and then create them and build them out, and then each department will say which ones they think their department would like for it to fund and which ones we fully go, and some aren't funded, and that's where some of the ones I've gone to NGOs and others and said, hey, city is not willing to do this one, but I think it's important, and then we'll ask industry and others to cover some of the ones. So we go through a list as our city staff will, and they'll pick and prioritize the ones we think are important. And sometimes ones I think are important are no longer there, and so you'll see that they've stopped collecting it since July 2021. But it's an expensive endeavor by the city. I don't think it has provided the benefit yet, and so I really hope that we can start to see the benefit of it, because I don't want to lose it. I think it's a huge opportunity for us to keep growing in it, because we should have that data. You should be able to know which block has street trees, and we should be able to be doing it real time, because real time data is so important for us. And so if we can start to do that, we'd be able to look at a heat map when we have a heat dome, know where the 99 deaths were, know what the tree canopy was, go and send our parks team out there to plant trees, right, water stations. Like, we should be able to put that instantly, right? We know exactly which are the hot spots for accidents in the city, right? We can look at those cameras, figure what it is, and we should be fixing it as quickly as we possibly can. So it's a good question. It's costing us a lot of money, and as our budgets get tighter coming out of COVID, I'm nervous that we'll start to see that squeezed.
Just going to add something to that, which I thought was kind of interesting is over the years is hackathons. It was city source data. And some of the things that have come out of there in terms of, we wrote within 24 hours a mobile phone app that for bicycles that tells you where there's flooding, where there's potholes, where there's construction going on, that kind of stuff. Or there was another one that was, taking a look at how long, what the impact was of construction delays, so that cities could better plan where they're going to do construction, so you don't do construction on 2 routes that all of a sudden just make it really, really bad, without realizing it, right? So it was really interesting, some of the ideas that people came out of with these things. I thought it was a fantastic way to, encourage people to use the data, and where the city can benefit from it.
And I guess on the funding, I'll do one last bit. The elected officials, it's just a line item of $100+ million. And so it does get complicated, and it breaks down, but when we get to those tough priorities, when you're saying a youth worker at Britannia or a $100 million IT budget, there was a lot more conversations this last budget on could they go to 80, what would 65 million, like what would those changes look like? And I think we're going to need the industry to start to show the benefits of it, and we need the public to start to see it, because we have as a city put a significant amount. Jerry Adcock, who is our digital, and she's moved on, she was fantastic and made some significant changes to what we've done as a city. And she's no longer with the city, but there's still momentum there. And I just hope that we can, as a city, start to see the benefits of it so we can keep funding it.
I just want to add to that. Obviously, I don't work for the city and can't answer budgeting questions, so I'd love to. As like all the stuff I said about data security and all these kinds of things, it's super, super important for us to be aware and good stewards and producing technology that is solving these problems in a really responsible way and counting for these issues. However, I believe it's absolutely crucial for cities to invest in this, because we haven't talked about climate change yet, but how do we get to zero, net zero, whatever like that? Well, if we're not measuring it, we don't even know where we are now, never mind when we get there, right? So it's absolutely essential that we use the power of technology to instrument our cities. And cities all over the world recognize this reality. There are complications and things we have to consider to make this happen as engineers and developers and all the things that we do for a living. But it is with that ultimate goal of understanding our environment. That's the perspective I'm coming from on this. And it's the only way we're going to be able to solve all this climate change stuff, building emissions and all these kinds of things.
Yeah, and we're seeing that with buildings, because we're going to hopefully come to an outcome base. So instead of saying you have to have walls at 14 inches, you need to have triple pane windows, we're going to say if you meet this outcome, but we're going to have to have sensors to test it. We're going to have to know before and after. So it's going to be up to you on how you build the building, because we're seeing that sparks innovation. It changes the way you will design it, and it's really critical that we start to be more outcome based. But to do that, we have to have the data and the sensors to be able to make it happen.
Alrighty, another question from the crowd up front here.
Most cities are running massive infrastructure deficits. Smart devices generally would have a lower lifespan, I would imagine, than traditional devices. Is it possible to reconcile those two trends in a way?
Yes, so this is where I see impacts and some of the innovative stuff we're doing, where we can actually, instead of taking out a whole pipe, they're recognizing how much needs to be done, and they send a little robot in, they're painting it from the inside, and they're recognizing that can do longevity. So our infrastructure, we are needing AI, and we're needing basically that data from what's underneath the ground so we don't have to rip them up because it's so expensive. And so the more we can get data on this stuff and the more we can better understand flows, we don't need to build as big pipes if we stop sending all of our rainwater to Iona. It's costing us millions and millions of dollars every week. If we had understanding of when it rains, how a roof can hold more water, then we could save significant amount of money. So for me, I think this is going to be a huge saver, and this is what's the problem you're trying to solve, right? Problem we're trying to solve is we have an infrastructure deficit that's significant. We have pipes over 100 years old. We need to figure out how to find new ways to move that water, reduce that energy, so we don't have to build huge new plants and huge new generators and all of that, because we're better utilizing what we have.
I would actually say when it comes to a lot of the infrastructure around smart technologies with transportation, they have a pretty successful life cycle. Some of the adaptive street lighting technology is legacy now, and so that's where you would, a life cycle, when you come up with a new technology, it's going to become sort of rudimentary really fast nowadays. But when it comes to, let's say, Bluetooth sensors or dynamic message signs or variable speed limit signs, all of that sort of technology has actually really low cost. If you wanted to put in a lane reversal system, for example, versus building an additional Lionsgate bridge, the lane reversal system is going to be hands down a fraction of the cost. So in that, 80% of the technology, I think, is really cost effective and helping infrastructure costs over the long run, but 20% might fail because it's so fresh and so new, it becomes a legacy.
Alrighty, yeah, over here.
So as we're talking about smart technology being introduced into cities, I was wondering what your take on what the effect on people's mental health is going to be, because as we've seen with devices like computer screens, blue light affecting people's sleep schedules, stimulants affecting people's, emotions and other things. As we introduce more and more and more pieces of technology, sensors, displays, emitters, lights at night into these cities, how do you think that's going to affect people living in those cities just passively?
So I realized I forgot to repeat the previous questions for the folks on stream. Yeah, sorry. So that question was, what do you see the impact of smart cities on mental health, in particular around like screens or emitters or lights? Did I get that about right? Okay.
There's a few we're seeing. I was a director of Easy Park. One of the things, parking is a huge one. The amount of time we're spending driving around, and we know that driving is not good for your mental health. And so one of the things they recognize, if you know where the parking spot is, instead of stressing because you're late and you're looking for parking, if your car knows where that parking spot is before you get there because you've set it up and you book that space and you go and you park and it's easy, it reduces your stress significantly. And we're seeing that in different cities where you're not spending that 5-10 minutes stress before you get to your event or you get to work because you know where it already is. Right? So I think there's a few technologies, and that's where root cause is big for me, is understanding what we're trying to solve. And a lot of the stuff's pretty passive that we've seen with smart buildings where you don't know that stuff is working, right? Like that the elevators are shut off because it's saving energy, right? The Internet of Things is just doing it for you. And so I think a lot of it's hopefully not using your screens or an app. It's going to just use the system to know how many people and using different kind of tags. So that's what I'm hoping, is that we can get to a point where we're using less and less screens. And lights is a good one because we're on one of the biggest bird flyways, and light pollution is becoming significant with LEDs. And so we need to better utilize kind of sensors and others, because some of the industrial lands, when you walk through there, it could be noon or 1 o'clock in the afternoon. It is so bright. And so I agree that we do need to change technologies to better work with the environment?
So actually there's a lot of research and a lot of knowledge around lighting as it pertains to bird migration and your circadian rhythm. And a lot of the earlier LED technology that was utilized was in a color temperature that's called 4,000 Kelvin. And 4,000 Kelvin has been known to affect your sleep cycles. So a lot of the municipalities, Vancouver included, has changed their color temperatures to 3,000 Kelvin. 2,700 Kelvin is actually really good for wildlife, but if you're talking about frogs and bats and nesting swallows, you want to use an even different color temperature, 2,200 Kelvin. There's other smart technologies that we can do for street lights with street lighting that would also dim your lighting at nighttime to reduce the effects on bird migration. And then there's also a whole association around that called dark sky compliance. And a lot of the LEDs nowadays have to meet. A municipality can put it in their bylaw that one must meet dark sky compliance, and in order to meet dark sky compliance, your light has to be 3,000 Kelvin or less.
This is a really great question. We're kind of thinking about mental health from noise pollution standpoint, less light-based stuff. We're actually deploying a bunch of sensors now that just measure the noise energy in an environment. And because how it affects our sleep, maybe there's some rowdy people outside your apartment building or something like that. It's a heavy impact on our mental health because we're tired and annoyed and all these kinds of things. So again, it's really all about that environment, understanding the environment and giving the cities tools to make their citizens' lives better, right, by improving the environment in some way. I can't speak much to screens. We try to avoid that kind of stuff in our technology, but of course, not the cloud application. It's awesome, and you need a screen to watch it, by the way, but it's in the environment. There's so many things that are unnatural that we produce as humans in our industrial state. So definitely huge thing that I know for a fact cities are paying a ton of attention to. And the technologies are really just now coming up where you can have battery-powered devices that are continuously transmitting on LTE, M, or NB-IoT that are just really low power. You have like these 2-month battery life, 24/7 monitoring kind of thing, right? So we're getting into the area where we can start solving these mental health problems that are caused from the environment in which we live.
All right, I think we got time for one more question from the crowd over here.
I actually have 2 questions, one's really quick.
You gotta make them quick.
Okay, first question, this just, John's question, Peter made me think about this. I've been noticing, so a lot of the lights in Metro Vancouver have been replaced with LEDs. I'm noticing patterns of purple lights popping up. Does that have to do with light pollution?
It's a failure in the ballast of the Autobahn fixture.
Okay.
Specifically, that company it's called Autobahn is the name of the company, AEL for short, and they had a product failure, like a batch failure of the ballasts in that specific fixture, and it's happening all over Vancouver, and Vancouver is like going up and replacing them. It's a life cycle thing, so they can just ship it back to Autobahn, and Autobahn will reimburse them for it. Yeah, it's not actually a night. Like I thought the first time I saw it, I thought it was like a dark. I'm like, is this a rave? Where are we right now?
For the folks on stream, that was a question about why the street lights are turning purple. And the second question?
So my second question was, it's been brought up, I think, a few times this night, about talking about having more intelligent traffic signaling. And also the YouTube channel Not Just Bikes has been brought up, and he's talked about that a lot. I think his most recent video was specifically on that.
Watch that over lunch.
So I'm curious, what are the barriers that Vancouver is facing to implement that?
So the question for the stream was, there's been a lot of talk of smart traffic signaling and in particular, or like also talking about Not Just Bikes, who just released a video about this. What are the barriers to implementing that in Vancouver?
Okay, so largely, for the first step to optimizing your traffic signal system would be to coordinate. So coordinating your green times creates a green band along your arterial roadways so that the vehicles can traverse hitting every green as long as they're going the speed limit. The problem with doing that within the city of Vancouver proper, like our downtown, like Broadway's, like the big roads, like Commercial Ave, mostly Broadway, is that we have a lot of pedestrian activated signals. So we, at the City of Vancouver, I don't work for the City of Vancouver, but I do a lot of work with the City of Vancouver, really prioritize the movements of pedestrians and cyclists. And so to optimize the signal system for vehicle traffic just wouldn't be in line with what we're trying to do for active transportation. Does that help?
Yeah, that helps in part, but I'm also wondering that one of the things not just bikes is talking about, like you're saying, you're optimizing for cyclists and pedestrians, is they, in Amsterdam at least, I believe they'll use radar or possibly computer vision to detect pedestrians and cyclists ahead.
Okay, so there's two reasons for that within the City of Vancouver. So the City of Vancouver does actually use radar sensors. The company that they implement is called Wavetronics, and you can see that around Granville and also in the Olympic Village area. The problem with that is that we also require, so a signal can detect a bicycle or a pedestrian, lickety-split, but the bicycle doesn't recognize that the signal has detected them, and then they do illegal, sketchy things. So, we've found with lots of municipalities, not just Vancouver, have found that the bicycle push button is the most effective way to turn the traffic signal controller, because the user knows that they are in control and they're enacting change. But they are in instances where a bicycle push button just doesn't make any sense anywhere close to the cycle track, using Wavetronics and radar to detect peds and bicycles in the City of Vancouver today. That's happening.
Alrighty, I think we have hit our time here. I'm going to hand this over to, I think, Madison for closing remarks.
Sorry, I'm so glad you're excited.
Alrighty, yeah, Madison, come on in.
Thank you, Tony. I have to make the observation about the bicycle push button. If anybody's ever been a passenger in a car and you're at a light and then the driver's like, can you get out and go press that button for me? Because it'll make the light change faster. So it's, yeah. I'm up here just because I want to say thank you to everybody. I want to say thank you to our speakers for tonight, and I want to say thank you to everybody for attending. Please give yourselves a round of applause.